The rain was relentless, hammering the New York City pavement as I sprinted toward the glass doors of the publishing house, my heart pounding louder than the storm. My name is Ethan Carter, 25, and today was my showta junior editor position at Horizon Press. The kind of job I'd dreamed of since I was a kid devouring novels under my bedsheets. But as I shook off my soaked jacket in the lobby, a chilling realization hit. I was about to walk into a room where I'd have to hide who I was. Again. The elevator dinged, and I smoothed my tie, my reflection staring back like a stranger. Growing up in a small Ohio town, I'd learned early to bury parts of myself. Being gay wasn't just a secret, it was a survival tactic. High school whispers, family dinners thick with unspoken judgment, and a father who'd rather quote scripture than ask about my life taught me to keep my truth locked tight. New York was supposed to be different, a fresh start, but the fear clung to me like damp clothes. I stepped into the sleek office, greeted by a receptionist who barely looked up. Ethan Carter. They're ready for you. Her voice was clipped, and my stomach twisted. The interview room was a glass box, modern and cold, with two people waiting: Claire Thompson, 26, with curly auburn hair and a warm smile that felt like a lifeline, and Ryan Holt, 27, all sharp angles and intense eyes, his suit screaming authority. They were the gatekeepers to my dream, and I had to convince them I belonged without slipping up. Ethan, welcome, Claire said, her voice soft but professional. Tell us why you're here. I launched into my prepared spiel: my English degree, my internship at a small press, my passion for stories that change lives. Ryan leaned forward, scribbling notes, his gaze piercing. I was mid-sentence about my favorite novel when he interrupted. Your portfolio mentions a blog you ran in college, Ryan said, tapping his pen. Something about identity and literature. Care to elaborate? My mouth went dry. The blog. I'd forgotten it was in their app project I'd poured my heart into, dissecting queer themes in classic novels. It was public. Yes, but I hadn't expected it to come up. Not like this. Yeah, I stammered, my pulse racing. It explored how identity shapes storytelling. You know, universal themes. I tried to pivot, but Ryan's eyes narrowed, like he'd caught a scent. Claire tilted her head, curious, not hostile, but the room felt smaller. I was unraveling. They didn't know, I told myself. They couldn't. But the air crackled with something unspoken. Claire smiled, breaking the tension. That sounds fascinating. What inspired it? Her question was kind, but it felt like a trap. I could lie, dodge, keep the mask on. Or I could take a chance. My throat tightened as I weighed the cost. This was New York, not Ohio. This was my dream. But hiding who I was felt like betraying every story I wanted to tell. I wrote it because I'm gay, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The room froze. Ryan's pen stopped midair. Claire's eyes widened, not in judgment, but in something I couldn't read. My heart slammed against my ribs. I'd just thrown my future into the fire, and I didn't know if it would burn or blaze. Ryan leaned back, his face unreadable. Interesting, he said, the word hanging like a guillotine. Claire glanced at him, then back at me. her expression softening. "Ethan, that's brave," she said. Brave. I felt like I was drowning. I braced for the polite dismissal. The "we'll be in touch." Instead, Ryan set down his pen and did something that still makes my breath catch. He smiled. The rest of the interview blurred. Ryan asked about my blog's impact. Not with skepticism, but genuine interest. Claire shared how Horizon was pushing for diverse voices. Her enthusiasm infectious. I answered their questions, but my mind was reeling. Why weren't they shutting me down? Why did it feel like they cared? As I left, Claire handed me her card. "We'll call you," she said, her eyes holding mine a moment too long. Ryan nodded, his smile lingering. I stumbled back into the rain, my head spinning. Had I just blown it? Or had I stumbled into something bigger? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment I'd said it. The way the air shifted. My phone buzzed at 2 a.m. A text from an unknown number. "Ethan, it's Claire. Coffee tomorrow. We need to talk." My stomach flipped. This wasn't a job offer. It was something else. The next morning, I met Claire at a cozy coffee shop in Brooklyn. Its wooden walls lined with books. She was already there, sipping a latte, her auburn curls catching the light. "You were bold yesterday," she said. No preamble. Not many people would have done that. I shrugged, unsure how to respond. Was this a pep talk or a warning? She leaned in, her voice low. "Ryan and I, we're not just colleagues. We're trying to change things at Horizon. Make it a place where stories like yours don't have to hide." I blinked. Processing. "You mean?" "Yeah," she said, a spark in her eyes. "Ryan's bi. I'm queer. We saw your blog before the interview. We wanted to know if you'd be real with us." My jaw dropped. They'd known. The whole time. Claire laughed at my shock. "You're not the only one who's had to hide, Ethan. But you don't have to hear. Not with us." She slid a folder across the table. "This is our pitch for a new imprint, Queer Stories. Raw and real. We want you on board." I stared at the folder, my hands trembling. This wasn't just a job. It was a chance to be seen, to tell stories that mattered. But doubt crept in. Was I ready? Could I trust them? I'd spent so long guarding myself. The idea of letting go felt like stepping off a cliff. "Take your time," Claire said, her voice gentle. "But know this, we're not just offering you a job. We're offering you a place to belong." I walked home through the city, the folder clutched to my chest. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't dared to hope for, possibility. But as I reached my apartment, my phone rang. It was my dad. His voice was cold, familiar. "Ethan, we need to talk about your choices." My heart sank. The past wasn't done with me yet. My phone felt like a brick in my hand as Dad's voice cut through the warmth of Claire's offer. "Choices," he said, the word dripping with judgment, like I'd picked being gay off a menu. I stood in my cramped apartment, the New York skyline glittering through the window, a cruel contrast to the weight of his call. "Dad, I'm busy," I said, my voice tighter than I meant. I hadn't spoken to him in months. Not since I'd left Ohio for good. Back then, he'd found my blog, read the posts I'd poured my soul into, and called it a phase. Now, his tone was sharper, like he'd been stewing. Your mother saw your name on some website, he said. Something about that lifestyle. You're embarrassing us, Ethan. My chest tightened. The website was probably Horizon's candidate list, or maybe my blog had resurfaced. Either way, it felt like a punch. I wanted to scream that this was my life. Not a scandal, but the word stuck. I'm just trying to live. Dad, I managed. Can we talk later? He didn't answer, just hung up. The silence was louder than his words. I sank onto my couch, the folder from Claire still in my lap. Her offer was a lifeline, but my past was an anchor. The next day, I met Ryan at Horizon's office to discuss the imprint. He was different outside the interview list guarded, his buzz cut catching the light as he leaned back in his chair. Claire told me about the coffee shop, he said, his voice steady but warm. You in? I hesitated. It's a lot. I've never worked on something this big. Or this personal. I didn't say. Ryan nodded, like he understood the weight I wasn't voicing. I get it. I came out at 22, right after college. My family didn't speak to me for a year. His honesty caught me off guard. I'd expected corporate polish. Not this. Why me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You don't even know if I'm good enough. Ryan leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. Because you're not afraid to be real, Ethan. That's rarer than you think in this industry. We spent hours brainstorming. The imprint, called Prism, would focus on queer narratives novels, memoirs, poetry. Ryan's passion was infectious, but it was his vulnerability that stayed with me. He talked about his own struggles, the jobs he'd lost for being too open, the relationships that crumbled under pressure. I saw myself in his story, and it scared me as much as it inspired me. That night, I started drafting ideas for Prism, my laptop glowing in the dark. But Dad's call haunted me. I opened my old blog, scrolling through posts I'd written at 19 angry, hopeful, raw. One line stood out. Stories save us when the world won't. I wanted to believe it, but the world kept pushing back. The next week, Claire invited me to a team dinner at her apartment in the East Village. It was a small group, her, Ryan, and two other editors. Both queer, both welcoming. The space was warm, filled with books and mismatched furniture, a stark contrast to Horizon's sleek offices. Over wine and pasta, they shared their dreams for Prism. Claire wanted stories that felt like home. Ryan wanted ones that challenged norms. I listened, my heart swelling, but a part of me still felt like an outsider, waiting for the catch. As the night wound down, Claire pulled me aside. You're quiet, she said, her eyes searching mine. What's holding you back? I didn't want to admit it. Dad's call. The fear of failing. The instinct to hide. But her gaze was steady, and I cracked. My family, they don't get it, I said. I thought moving here would make it easier, but it's like I'm still fighting the same battles. Claire nodded, her hand resting lightly on my arm. You don't have to fight alone anymore. She said, "We're in this together." Her words lingered as I walked home, the city alive around me. For the first time, I felt like I could belong somewhere. But the next morning, an email from Horizon's HR department stopped me cold. Additional background check required. It read. My stomach dropped. Background checks were standard, but the timing felt off. Had someone dug into my blog? Was my past catching up? I called Claire, my voice shaking. Is this about me being out? She was silent for a moment, then said, I don't know, Ethan. But I'll find out. Her tone was fierce, protective, and I clung to it like a lifeline. But as I hung up, doubt crept in. Had I been naive to trust them? Was Prism too good to be true? The answer came sooner than I expected. Ryan texted me that afternoon, meet me at the office. Now. His urgency set my nerves on edge. I grabbed my jacket and headed out, the city blurring past me. Whatever was coming. I wasn't ready, but I was done running. The Horizon office felt different when I arrived, the glass walls reflecting my anxiety back at me. Ryan was waiting in a small conference room, his usual confidence replaced by a tense frown. Sit, he said, closing the door. My heart raced. This wasn't about the imprint. There's a problem, he began, his voice low. Someone on the board flagged your blog. They're calling it controversial. My stomach twisted. Controversial. It was just Mimi thoughts. My truth. I thought of Dad's call, the way he'd spat out lifestyle. Was this the same fight? Just dressed in corporate jargon. Who? I asked, my voice barely steady. Ryan sighed, rubbing his temple. An exec. Harold Grayson. Old school. Big influence. He's pushing for a values alignment review before we move forward with Prism. I laughed bitterly. Values alignment. Code for, we don't want your kind here. Claire burst in, her face flushed. I just heard, she said, glaring at Ryan. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Ryan raised his hands. I'm handling it. Claire. But we need to be smart. She turned to me, her eyes fierce. Ethan, this isn't about you. It's about Grayson's ego. He's been against Prism from the start. I felt like I was sinking. So what now? They fire me before I even start. Claire shook her head. No. We fight for you. For this. Ryan nodded, his jaw tight. Grayson's one voice. Not the whole board. We've got allies. But we need to prove Prism's worth in yours. The next few days were a blur of strategy sessions. Claire and Ryan rallied the team, drafting a proposal that framed Prism as a market necessity, not a risk. I poured myself into it, writing sample pitches for queer authors, my fingers flying over the keyboard. But every night, I'd lie awake, replaying Grayson's controversial label. It wasn't just about the job, Anna Maria, it was about whether I could exist here. As myself. One evening, Claire invited me to a queer open mic night in the West Village, a dimly lit bar packed with poets and singers. You need a break, she said, handing me a beer. I watched a trans poet perform a piece about reclaiming their name, their voice raw and unapologetic. It hit me like a wave. This was what Prism could do: amplify voices like theirs. Like mine. Claire nudged me. You should read something. I froze. I hadn't shared my own writing in years. Not since the blog. But her encouragement, and the crowd's warmth, pushed me to the stage. I read a short piece I'd written about leaving Ohio. The ache of hiding. The hope of finding home. The applause was quiet but real. And Claire's grin was brighter than the stage lights. Back at our table, she leaned in. That's why we need you. Ethan. That voice. I wanted to believe her. But Grayson's shadow loomed. The next day, Ryan called a meeting with the board's progressive members. I wasn't invited. But Claire texted updates. They're listening. Keep writing. I did, pouring my fear and hope into every word, determined to prove I belonged. Then came the bombshell. Ryan called me late, his voice grim. Grayson's pushing for a public statement. He wants Horizon to clarify its values before Prism launches. My blood ran cold. A statement could mean anything: support or a polite way to bury us. What do we do? I asked. We go public first, Ryan said. Show the world what Prism is before Grayson can spin it. It was a gamble, but Claire was already on board, drafting a social media campaign. They wanted me to write the first post, a personal story to introduce Prism. My story. I spent the night drafting, my hands shaking. I wrote about the interview, the moment I'd come out, the fear and the hope that followed. I wrote about stories saving me when nothing else could. By dawn, I had 1,000 words, raw and honest. Claire read it and hugged me. This is it, she said. This is Prism. We posted it on Horizon's blog, tagged with Prism Stories. The response was immediate: likes, shares, comments from queer readers, authors, allies. But Grayson wasn't done. His office sent a memo demanding a meeting with the full board. My post had forced his hand, and now the fight was out in the open. As I walked into that meeting, Claire and Ryan flanking me, I felt the weight of every choice I'd made. This wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about who I was and who I could become. The boardroom was a fortress of glass and steel, the New York skyline looming like a silent judge. I sat between Claire and Ryan, my palms sweating as Harold Grayson took his seat at the head of the table. His silver hair and tailored suit screamed power, but his eyes cold, calculating, locked onto me like I was a problem to be solved. Ethan Carter, he said, his voice smooth but sharp. Your post has caused quite a stir. The room was silent, a dozen board members watching. Claire squeezed my hand under the table, a quiet anchor. Ryan cleared his throat. It's also gained us 10,000 followers in 48 hours, he said. Prism's trending. Grayson's lips twitched. Not quite a smile. Popularity isn't the issue. Alignment is. He slid a tablet across the table, my blog post glowing on the screen. This is personal. Horizon is a business, not a platform for activism. My stomach churned. Activism. I just told my truth. Claire leaned forward, her voice steady. Prism is a business move. Harold. Queer stories are a growing market. Ethan's post proves there's demand. A few board members nodded, but Grayson's gaze didn't waver. And if it alienates our core audience? He countered. We can't risk the company's reputation. I wanted to shrink, to disappear. But Ryan's voice cut through. Our core audience is changing. Ethan's story shows we're listening. He slid a folder toward Grace and our proposal, packed with data on queer literature sales, reader demographics, and endorsements from authors we'd already contacted. I'd spent nights compiling it, my fear channeled into numbers and hope. Grayson skimmed it, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to me. Why should we trust you with this? You're young, untested. Your personal choices could complicate things. The room tensed. Personal choices. There it was again. That coded jab. I felt 16 again, hiding in my room, afraid of my own shadow. I took a breath, my voice shaking but clear. Because I know what it's like to feel invisible. Stories like mine, they matter. They save people. Horizon can lead that change, or it can stay stuck in the past. Claire's eyes shone with pride. Ryan gave a subtle nod. Grayson said nothing, but a woman across the table, mid-50s, sharp glasses, spoke up. I agree with Ethan. This is the future. The meeting dragged on, arguments ping-ponging. Grayson pushed for a neutral approach. Claire and Ryan countered with passion and data. I spoke when asked, my voice growing steadier. By the end, the board was split. But the woman in glasses, Margaret, the CFO, called for a vote. Prism would move forward, pending a trial run. I wasn't fired, but Grayson's stare told me the fight wasn't over. After, Claire pulled me into a hug. You did it, she whispered. But I didn't feel victorious. Grayson's words echoed Dad's, and the weight of both pressed on my chest. That night, I called Mom, hoping for something softer. She was quiet, then said, we just want you to be careful. Ethan. Careful. Another word for hide. The next week, Prism's trial began. I worked late, curating submissions. My inbox flooded with stories from queer writers, teens, elders, people like me who'd felt alone. Each one felt like a brick in a wall I was building, a shield against Grayson's doubt. But the pressure was crushing. Ryan noticed, pulling me aside one evening. You're carrying too much, he said, his voice soft. We were in the break room, the city lights flickering outside. You don't have to prove yourself to everyone. I laughed. Bitter. Don't I? Grayson's waiting for me to fail. Ryan shook his head. Grayson's not your dad. And even if he was, you're enough. His words hit hard. I hadn't told him about Dad, but he saw it, fear, the need to be more than my past. We talked for hours. About his own coming out. The brother who still wouldn't call. I shared pieces of Ohio. The nights I'd cried myself to sleep. By the time we left, the office dark, I felt lighter, like I'd left some of the weight behind. But the next morning, a new email from Grayson awaited. Prism's trial is under review. Meet me tomorrow. My heart sank. Claire and Ryan were furious, but I felt something else resolve. I wasn't just fighting for a job. I was fighting for every story in my inbox, every voice that deserved to be heard. Grayson's office was a museum of power: mahogany desk, leather chairs, A view of Manhattan that screamed untouchable. He sat back, his fingers steepled, as I stood across from him, Claire and Ryan at my sides. Prism's trial shows promise, he said, his tone clipped. But there are concerns about focus. Your involvement. Ethan raises questions. My throat tightened. Questions. He meant Mimi identity. My existence. Claire's jaw clenched. But Ryan spoke first. Ethan's the heart of Prism. His post alone drove half our submissions. Grayson raised an eyebrow. And half the complaints. Some investors aren't thrilled with the direction. I felt the room tilt. Investors. This wasn't just Grayson, no, it was bigger. A machine I couldn't fight. But Claire stepped forward. Her voice like steel. Those investors are out of touch. Our data shows Prism's audience is growing. Ethan's story started that. She slid a tablet toward him. Graphs glowing with engagement stats. I'd crunched those numbers myself. Late nights blurring into dawn. Grayson barely glanced at it. Numbers aren't everything. Trust is. He looked at me. His eyes cold. Can we trust you to prioritize Horizon's reputation? The question wasn't about my war kit, was about who I was. I wanted to scream. But I remembered the open mic. The poet's voice. The stories in my inbox. They deserved better than my fear. Yes, I said, my voice steady. Because I believe in stories that tell the truth. That's what Horizon needs. Grayson's lips thinned. But he didn't argue. Instead, he dismissed us with a wave. We'll see what the board decides. Outside, Claire hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe. You were incredible, she said. Ryan grinned, clapping my shoulder. You're tougher than you look, Carter. But their warmth couldn't shake the dread pooling in my gut. Grayson wasn't done, and neither was the past. That night, I got a text from an old high school friend. Sarah. Saw your post. Proud of you. But your dad's been talking to people back home. He's not happy. My stomach dropped. Not happy was an understatement. I could picture him, ranting to his church group, calling my life a sin. I didn't reply to Sarah. Instead, I opened my laptop and read the latest Prism submission, Trans Teen's Memoir, a lesbian love story set in the 80s. They grounded me, reminded me why I was fighting. The next day, Claire and I met with a young author, Mia, whose novel about a queer kid in rural America hit me like a mirror. She was nervous, her hands fidgeting as she pitched. I wrote it for kids like me, she said, so they know they're not alone. I nodded, my throat tight. I'd been that kid, hiding in books, dreaming of a world that saw me. After, Claire and I walked through Central Park, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot. You okay? She asked. I told her about Dad, Sarah's text, the weight of it all. She listened, her silence a kind of strength. You're building something real, Ethan, she said. Not just for you, but for Mia, for all of them. Her words carried me through the next week. As Prism's trial gained traction, social media buzzed with Prism stories, and authors sent thank you notes that made my heart ache. But Grayson's review loomed. Rumors swirled some board members wanted to scale back Prism. Make it less controversial. I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for the axe. Then Ryan called me to his apartment, a small loft in Harlem. He was pacing when I arrived, a rare crack in his calm. "Grayson's pushing for a compromise," he said. "Keep Prism, but tone it down. No overtly queer stories." My blood boiled. Tone it down. That was erasure. Plain and simple. "We can't let him," I said. Ryan nodded, but his eyes were tired. "It's not just him. The investors are spooked. We need to win something big." I thought of Mia's novel. The stories piling up. "What if we launch with a bestseller?" I said. "Something undeniable." Ryan's eyes lit up. "You've got someone in mind." I did. Mia's book was raw, powerful, universal. If we could fast-track it, get it in front of the right people, it could change the game. But it meant risking everything. My job, Prism, my place in this city. I looked at Ryan, his faith in me unwavering, and made my choice. Mia's novel became our battle plan. I spent days editing her manuscript, her words cutting deeper with every page. It was about a queer teen named Sam, navigating a small town's prejudice while falling in love with a preacher's daughter. It was my story, in a way, and 1,000 others. If Prism could launch with this, Grayson's compromise wouldn't stand a chance. Claire and Ryan were all in. We worked late, refining the pitch, reaching out to agents and reviewers. Mia was stunned, her eyes wide when we told her we wanted her book as Prism's flagship. "You really think it's good enough?" she asked. I smiled, remembering my own doubts. "It's more than good. It's necessary." But Grayson wasn't idle. He scheduled another board meeting, this time inviting key investors. Claire got wind of it through a friend in HR. "He's stacking the deck," she said, her voice tight. "We need to move fast." We decided to host a reading event for Mia's book, a pre-launch to generate buzz. If we could get influencers and media there, it might sway the board. The event was set for a bookstore in Brooklyn, a cozy space packed with queer readers and allies. I helped Mia prepare, coaching her through nerves. "Just tell your truth," I said, echoing Claire's words to me. The night of the reading, the room was electric, people crammed into every corner, their faces eager. Mia read a chapter, her voice trembling but strong, and the crowd hung on every word. I saw tears, nods, hands clasped. This was what Prism was for. Claire squeezed my arm after. "This is it, Ethan. This is what we're fighting for." Ryan was working the room, charming a reviewer from the Times. But my phone buzzed, shattering the moment. It was Dad again. "I read your post," his voicemail said. "You need to stop this. Come home." I deleted it, my hand shaking, but his voice lingered like a bruise. The next day, Grayson's meeting loomed. We presented Mia's book, backed by early reviews and social media hype. Margaret, the CFO, was impressed, but Grayson was unmoved. "It's a risk," he said. "One book doesn't justify an entire imprint." Ryan countered with sales projections, Claire with reader testimonials. I spoke last, my voice raw. This isn't just a book. It's a lifeline for kids who feel like I did alone. Afraid. Prism can change that. The room was quiet. Margaret nodded slowly. Others shifted uncomfortably. Grayson's face was a mask, but he didn't push back. The vote was delayed, a small victory, but a victory. We left the meeting buzzing, but I couldn't shake Dad's voicemail. Home. As if Ohio had ever been that. That night, I met Claire and Ryan for drinks. We toasted to Mia, to Prism, but I was distracted. Claire noticed. Talk to me, she said, her eyes soft. I told them about Dad's call, the way it dragged me back to that scared kid in Ohio. Ryan leaned in. You're not that kid anymore. You're building something bigger than his fear. Their belief carried me. But the next morning brought a new blow. An anonymous blog post, linked to Horizon's site, called Prism divisive and me a liability. It quoted my blog, twisting my words into something shameful. Claire was furious, suspecting Grayson's hand. Ryan was pragmatic. We fight fire with fire, he said. More stories. More voices. I spent the next week drowning in work, pushing the blog post out of my mind. Mia's book was gaining traction, pre-orders climbing. But the anonymous post spread, and whispers grew, colleagues avoiding my eyes, emails going unanswered. I felt exposed, like the interview all over again. Then Sarah texted again. Your dad's telling people you're confused. I'm sorry. I wanted to scream, to run. But Claire and Ryan wouldn't let me. They called an emergency meeting with Prism's team, now 6 strong, all queer or allies. We brainstormed a counter-campaign. A flood of Prism stories from readers sharing what queer books meant to them. I wrote the first post, my heart in every word. It went viral, drowning out the hate. But as the board's final vote approached, Grayson played his last card, a leaked email to investors, hinting at restructuring if Prism failed. The message was Clermy job. Our dream was on the line. The final board meeting was a battlefield. Every seat filled, the air thick with tension. Grayson sat at the head, his face calm but his eyes sharp, like a predator waiting for a misstep. Claire, Ryan, and I had spent days preparing, our pitch polished to a shine. Mia's book was now a pre-order hit, and Prism Stories had thousands of posts, a tidal wave of support. But Grayson's leaked email hung over us, a reminder of the stakes. Margaret opened the meeting, her voice steady. Prism's trial has exceeded expectations. Ethan, Claire, Ryan, your work speaks for itself. She gestured to a screen showing sales projections, social media metrics, and glowing reviews. My chest swelled, but Grayson raised a hand. Impressive, he said, his tone icy. But we must consider long-term stability. Prism's focus could alienate key stakeholders. He slid a report across the table, filled with cherry-picked complaints from conservative investors. My stomach twisted. This was his endgame fear over facts. Claire didn't flinch. Those stakeholders are a minority, she said, her voice fierce. Our data shows Prism's audience is young, diverse, and growing. Ignoring them is the real risk. Ryan backed her up, citing partnerships with bookstores and endorsements from major authors. I watched the board. Some nodding. Others stone-faced. Grayson's influence was slipping. But he wasn't done. "Ethan," he said, turning to me. "You're at the center of this. Convince us Prism is worth the gamble." Every eye was on me. I thought of Dad's voicemails. The anonymous blog. The kid I'd been. Hiding in books. Then I thought of Mia. The open mic. The stories flooding my inbox. This was bigger than me. I stood. My voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. Prism isn't a gamble, it's a necessity. I grew up thinking I was wrong. That my story didn't matter. Prism says it does. It says every queer kid, every person who's felt invisible, deserves to be seen. That's not just good business, it's right. The room was silent. Margaret smiled faintly. A few others shifted. Uncomfortable, but listening. Grayson's jaw tightened. But he didn't interrupt. When I sat, Claire squeezed my hand. Her eyes shining. Ryan gave me a nod. His pride clear. The vote was close 7-5. Prism was approved. With full funding. Cheers erupted from our team. But Grayson's face was stone. As we left, he pulled me aside. "You've won this round," he said quietly. "But don't think this changes everything." His words were a warning. But I was done being afraid. That night, we celebrated at Claire's apartment. Wine flowing. Laughter loud. Mia joined us. Her smile brighter than ever. "My book's really happening?" she asked. I hugged her. "It's just the start." But as the night wound down, my phone buzzed. Another voicemail from Dad. I didn't listen. I couldn't, not yet. The next week, Prism's launch was announced. Mia's book led the slate, with others in the pipeline. I was officially named junior editor. My role cemented. But the victory felt fragile. Grayson was still on the board, and whispers of controversy lingered. I threw myself into work. Editing late. Mentoring new authors. It was exhausting, but it was home. Then came the call I couldn't ignore. "Mom." Not Dad. This time. "Ethan. He's struggling," she said, her voice soft. "He read your post. He doesn't understand. But he's trying." Trying. The word was small, but it cracked something in me. I didn't know if I could forgive him. But for the first time, I wanted to try. Claire noticed my distraction at work. Over coffee, I told her about Mom's call. The ache it left. She listened, then said, "You don't owe him anything. But you deserve peace." Her words stayed with me as I boarded a train to Ohio. My heart a tangle of hope and fear. I wasn't going back to hide, I was going to face him. The train to Ohio felt like a journey back in time. The fields outside blurred into memories: high school, church, the nights I'd lie awake, terrified of who I was. I clutched Mia's manuscript, a talisman against the past. Dad had agreed to meet at a diner. Neutral ground. I didn't know what to expect. But Claire's words echoed, "You deserve peace." He was already there when I arrived. His face older, lined with something I couldn't name. "Ethan," he said, his voice gruff. No hug. No smile. Just a nod. We sat. The silence heavy. I waited for the lecture. The scripture. But he surprised me. "I read your blog," he said. "All of it." I braced myself, but his eyes were softer than I'd expected. "I don't get it," he admitted. "But you're my son. I don't want to lose you." The words were clumsy, raw, but they hit like a wave. He wasn't accepting Minute fully, but he was reaching out. For the first time, I saw him as human, not a wall. "I'm not asking you to understand," I said, my voice steady. "Just to let me be me." He nodded slowly, and we talked not about my identity, but about New York, Prism, the stories I was helping tell. It wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. But it was a start. Back in New York, Prism's launch was a triumph. Mia's book hit shelves. Reviews glowing. At the launch party, a bookstore packed with readers, I saw her sign copies. Her smile radiant. Claire and Ryan stood beside me. Our team, a family forged in fire. Grayson was there. Silent. His influence diminished, but not gone. I didn't care. This was our victory. Months later, I stood on a stage at a literary festival, reading a new piece about Prism, about finding home in stories. The crowd was small but warm. Their applause a quiet affirmation. Claire and Ryan were in the front row, their pride brighter than the lights. Afterward, a teen approached me, clutching Mia's book. "This saved me," they said, eyes shining. I hugged them, my heart full. Dad sent a letter a week later. Short. Simple. "I'm proud of you." I cried reading it. Not because it fixed everything, but because it was enough for now. I framed it. A reminder that change was possible, even in the hardest hearts. Prism grew, publishing voices that had been silenced too long. I grew too. No longer the scared kid from Ohio. I was Ethan Carter, junior editor. Queer. Unapologetic. The interview that started it all, the moment I'd feared would end me, had instead set me free. Their reaction, Claire and Ryan's belief, still left me speechless. But it also gave me a voice. And I was done staying silent.